He sold my car without asking. That's how it started. That one sentence cracked something in me that had been holding for years. Something small and strong and quiet. Jason stood in my kitchen that morning, tall and smug in his pressed shirt, sipping coffee from my favorite mug like he'd earned it. The same mug Arthur used to use every Sunday, chipped on the handle, stained just enough to show a life well lived. Jason looked right at me with that patronizing smile. The kind that says you won't understand, Mom, so I'll decide for you. He said it so casually like he was talking about the weather. Oh, by the way, I sold the Chevy. Sold it. Like it was a pair of shoes that didn't fit anymore. I just stared at him, fingers tightening around the mug. My heart didn't race, my voice didn't rise. I just felt this cold, still anger. He went on about how it was for my safety, how he got a decent deal, how he'd arranged rides to the pharmacy. Rides. To the pharmacy. Like I was a piece of luggage that needed shuttling around. He patted my shoulder before he left, said, "You'll thank me one day, Mom." That was the moment I decided he wouldn't see me cry. When the door shut, I looked out the window. My driveway was empty, emptier than it had ever been. My blue Chevy, the one Arthur and I had driven along the coast, was gone. Just gone. The air smelled of exhaust and betrayal. And then, I saw it. Jason's brand new SUV parked under the carport, shining like arrogance on wheels. The keys were sitting on the hallway table right beside the mail. An invitation. A dare. Or maybe an apology from the universe. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed the keys, my purse, and walked out. Locked the door behind me like I was closing the final chapter of a book that had run too long. When I turned the key in that SUV, the engine purred like a spoiled cat. The seat was too soft, the mirrors too clean, but I didn't care. I felt my pulse steady in a way it hadn't in years. The road opened before me, empty, forgiving, wide. I drove. Not fast. I don't do fast anymore. But I drove with purpose. The kind of purpose that doesn't need a destination. Just distance. Jason's voice echoed in my head. You'll thank me one day. No, Jason. You'll remember me one day. I ended up at the diner on Route 17. The same one Arthur used to love. Nothing had changed there. The cracked booths, the flickering open sign, the smell of grease and burnt toast that somehow made you feel safe. The man behind the counter looked up. Same crossword, same pencil behind his ear. Coffee? He asked. Yes, please, I said, sliding into a booth by the window. The SUV gleamed outside like it didn't belong. Too polished, too new, too much of him. The first sip of that coffee hit like truth. Bitter, strong, and exactly what I needed. I didn't bring my phone. Didn't want it. I knew Jason would call, panic, pace the living room, check the driveway. He'd probably call the police, tell them his elderly mother had gone missing. That would look good on him. I smiled into the cup. Let him wonder. I watched the sun creep higher, painting the empty highway in gold. For a moment I wasn't 74. I was 20 again, sneaking away from my father's farm in the old Ford to meet Arthur at the reservoir. That thrill, the taste of rebellion and freedom. It's something that never really dies. Just sleeps. And today it woke up. After breakfast I drove. No map, no plan. Just me and the hum of the road. I passed the community center, the church, the park where Jason once fell off his bike, and cried until Arthur scooped him up. Funny how he doesn't remember the people who caught him when he fell. By the time I got home, the afternoon light was fading. I parked the SUV exactly where my Chevy had always sat. The irony pleased me. Inside, the house smelled faintly of Jason's cologne, sharp and artificial, like something trying too hard to be pleasant. I sat at the kitchen table and took out a notepad. At the top of the page I wrote, "Things that are mine." And underneath, one by one, my house, my name, my memory, my silence, my decisions. I underlined the last one twice. That's the thing no one tells you about getting old. They talk about the aches, the loneliness, the fading of things. But no one talks about how people stop asking. They stop assuming you can want, decide, or fight back. I've let that go on too long. The phone started ringing around 1:17 p.m. I didn't answer. By the third call I turned it face down. It kept buzzing like a trapped insect. Let it. I pictured him pacing his expensive kitchen, his face tightening with every unanswered call. Maybe he thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe he'd tell Marlene I'd finally gone off the deep end. That would make a good story for their dinner guests. But this time the story wasn't his to tell. When the knock came, it was sharp, impatient. "Jason." "Mom? You home?" His voice was strained, that mix of worry and irritation he always used when things didn't go his way. "I've been calling," he said. "Can you open the door, please? I just want to talk." I sipped my tea and said nothing. He hesitated. "Look, I'm sorry about this morning. I didn't mean to surprise you." Surprise. That's what he called it. Not betrayal. Not theft. Surprise. His voice wavered. "Is the SUV here?" "It's fine, I'm not mad. Can we talk?" He wasn't used to silence. Jason thrived on control, on filling the air with explanations and charm until people gave in. When silence fought back, he didn't know where to stand. I heard him mutter something, maybe into his phone. Then the crunch of gravel, the slam of a car door, and the sound of an engine fading down the street. Only then did I move. I walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. The SUV sat exactly where it should. Hidden under the carport, still and certain. My heart didn't race. Didn't need to. For the first time in years I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. I sat back down at the table, pulled out my old checkbook, and started flipping through the pages. Every check, every signature was a record of how much of myself I'd given away over the years. Birthday money for the grandkids. Loan after loan for Jason. The totals made me dizzy. I'd been buying peace. Buying love. Buying quiet. Not anymore. I took a blank sheet and wrote one sentence. "You sold something that was mine, so I took something that was yours." I folded the paper once and placed it in the drawer beside my wedding ring. Jason thought I'd forgotten who I was. He thought I was too old to fight back. But he was wrong. This isn't revenge. This is remembering. The next morning I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet. That heavy kind of quiet that only comes after you've done something you can't undo. For a moment I wondered if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The SUV, the drive, the coffee, the note still folded in my drawer. Then I saw the keys on the counter, glinting in the faint morning light like a promise. No, it wasn't a dream. Jason hadn't come back last night. That surprised me. He's not the kind of man who lets things go, not even for a day. Maybe he was waiting for me to call first. To scold, to explain, to apologize. That's how he's trained the world to work around him. He makes the mess, and everyone else rushes in to clean it up. But not this time. I make coffee, real coffee. Not that weak stuff Marlene brings when she visits. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the steam rise, curling like ghosts from old conversations. Arthur's voice still came to me sometimes in the mornings. Not words exactly, more like a memory of how he'd say them. "Don't let them take your spark, Marth. That's the best part of you." I smiled a little at that. It had been years since anyone called me Marth. Halfway through my second cup, I heard a car pull up outside. I didn't move. Footsteps crunched on the walkway and then the sound of keys, his keys, rattling at the lock. The door didn't open, of course. I changed that lock myself after Arthur died. Jason didn't know that. "Mom." His voice strained but calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people practice in the mirror before they come to confront you. "It's me. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. A sigh, loud and dramatic. "Okay, I want to make sure you're safe. Can you open the door, please?" Safe. Always that word. I was so tired of it. Safe means contained. Safe means controlled. Safe means small enough to handle. He tried again. "I know you're upset, but I didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't be driving anymore, Mom. It's dangerous." I walked to the window, stood just behind the curtain and watched him. His hair was shorter than last time, and there were lines on his face I didn't remember. He looked tired. Not guilty, though. Jason never looked guilty. He rubbed his forehead, glanced toward the driveway, and froze. The SUV. I saw his expression change, confusion first, then disbelief, then something else. Fear, maybe. He turned back toward the door. "You have my car?" Still I said nothing. He took a step closer. "Mom, that's theft." "You can't." He stopped himself, forced a little laugh. "Look, okay, not theft. I get it. You're mad. But this isn't the way to handle things. You should have called me." I wanted to open the door not to talk but to tell him the truth, that I didn't owe him explanations. But then I remembered how it felt when he told me he'd sold the Chevy. How easily he'd taken what was mine. No. He could sit in his own silence for once. After a minute he muttered something. I caught the words stubborn and unbelievable, and walked back to his car. The tires crunched, the engine started, and then he was gone again. I went back to my seat, the house still echoing faintly with his presence. By noon the guilt started to creep in, thin, slippery, insistent. That's the curse of mothers, I think. Even when we're right, the guilt finds us. It doesn't care if our sons are 48 years old and full of arrogance. It still whispers that maybe we were too harsh, too quiet, too something. So I baked. That's what I do when the world feels heavy. I made an apple pie, Arthur's favorite. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and steady. When I pulled it from the oven, I laughed softly to myself. Arthur always said I baked when I was plotting. Maybe he was right. After lunch I called my bank. It wasn't revenge exactly, more restoration. I wanted my accounts back under my own control. Jason had convinced me years ago to give him limited access, just in case something happened to me. Said it was easier that way, that he could handle the bills and keep an eye on things. I'd agreed back then because it seemed harmless. But today I was done being harmless. The woman at the bank, Nancy, I think, recognized my voice. Good afternoon, Mrs. Mercer. What can I do for you today? I'd like to remove my son's access to my accounts, I said plainly. Effective immediately. There was a pause. Oh, of course. May I ask the reason for the change? I don't like people making decisions for me, I said. That was all she needed to hear. Took about 30 minutes. A few forms, a few clicks. Then she said, all set, Mrs. Mercer. Only you have access now. I smiled, not out of triumph but relief. For the first time in years my money was truly mine again. By evening I was tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from taking your life back one small piece at a time. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the streetlights flicker on. Across the road, Mrs. Langford's old house was still empty. The for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard. Funny how some houses seem to outlive everyone who ever loved them. That's how I felt lately. Like a house that hadn't been sold yet, but already cleared out. The phone rang again. I ignored it. Then again and again. Finally, I picked up on the fourth ring, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted it to stop. Mom! Jason's voice burst through the line. Thank God. I was about to drive back over there. You shouldn't waste the gas, I said. My voice came out steady, almost calm. He exhaled hard. Can we talk about this like adults? I'd like that, I said. You first. A pause. Okay. I know I should have told you about the car. I didn't want you to get upset. Upset, I repeated. You sold something that was mine, Jason. He hesitated. I know, but it's not like you were driving much. You barely leave the house. I figured. That's the problem, I said quietly. You figured. You didn't ask. He sighed, frustrated. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, Jason. I'm correcting it. Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. Then he said, fine. Keep the SUV if it means that much to you. It's not about the car, I said. Then what is it about? It's about you forgetting that I'm still here. He didn't respond. I waited. Nothing. Just breathing. Finally he muttered, I'll call you tomorrow, and hung up. I set the phone down gently. I didn't expect him to understand yet. That kind of understanding takes time, the kind that only comes when the people who raised you remind you they're not done living. I walked to the window again, tea in hand, and looked out at the SUV. Its dark surface reflected the faint light from my porch lamp. My own face looking back, lined but steady. Arthur used to say, Marth, you can't control what people do to you, but you can make damn sure they never forget you're not afraid. And I wasn't. Not anymore. Tomorrow I'd go to the post office. I had a letter to send. One that would make sure Jason couldn't touch what was left of my life without asking first. I took another sip of tea, the taste bitter and sweet all at once. Let him sleep uneasy tonight. He's finally met the part of me he's always underestimated. When I woke the next morning, the house was still and golden with early light. The kind of morning Arthur used to say felt like a clean page. Except this page wasn't blank. It already had my handwriting on it. Firm, deliberate, underlined. Jason wouldn't be happy about what came next. I dressed carefully, slacks, pressed blouse, light cardigan. Dignified. Not defiant. That's an important distinction when you're a 74-year-old woman trying to make people take you seriously. They hear angry, and they stop listening. But collected? They can't argue with that. I slipped my letter to Harold Price into my purse, alongside the neat folder of papers I'd been gathering. My bank statements, the property deed, the car title. My life summarized in a manila folder. Funny how that fits so easily into your hands when you're old. The walk to the bus stop took longer than it used to, but I didn't mind. The air was crisp. The sky streaked with that pale fall blue that always made me feel like something was about to change. When I got to Harold's office, he greeted me with that warm half-smile I remembered from the days when he and Arthur would argue about the best brands of bourbon. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Mercer," he said, standing to shake my hand. "How long has it been?" "Too long," I said. "But I'm here now." He studied me for a moment, the lawyer in him already awake. "So what brings you in today?" "I'm reclaiming my name," I said simply, placing the folder on his desk. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. He just opened it, scanning the documents with a kind of quiet respect. That's what I've always liked about Harold. He didn't treat me like I was frail. He treated me like a client. When he finished reading, he leaned back. "You've had some trouble with your son, I take it." "I've had some trouble remembering that being someone's mother doesn't mean being their property." He nodded slowly. "I can help you with that." For the next hour we went over everything: my accounts, the title transfer, the car sale. I didn't raise my voice once, but I could feel the heat under my skin. Harold listened, took notes, and when I was done he said the words I needed most. "Don't worry. We can fix this." By the time I left his office I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. I got home around noon, tired but satisfied. There was a note taped to my door in Jason's handwriting. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk." I tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Inside, the house was warm from the afternoon sun. I made a sandwich, sat down at the table, and allowed myself one deep sigh. Then the phone rang. I let it go once, twice, then picked up. "Mom." His voice was sharp, too controlled. Why did I get a notification from the bank saying my access was revoked? I took a slow sip of water before answering. "Because I revoked it." He exhaled through his nose like a frustrated teacher with a slow student. "You can't just, Mom. I handle your bills, your taxes. I handle them now." He paused. "Are you doing this because of the car? You're really going to punish me over that?" "I'm not punishing you," I said evenly. "I'm just reminding you who I am." Jason laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "You've been talking to someone, haven't you? Who put this idea in your head?" "Me," I said. Silence. Then quieter. "You're making a mistake." "I've made plenty," I replied. "But this isn't one of them." He didn't like that. I could tell. His tone changed, smoother now, more measured. "Listen, Mom. I get that you're upset, but this is going to create problems for everyone. You know how paperwork can get complicated at your age." "My age," I repeated softly. He hesitated. "I just mean, I know what you meant. Mom, I'm trying to help you." "No," I said. "You're trying to help yourself feel in control. There's a difference." For a second I thought he'd hang up. Then his voice came back, low and cold. "You're really doing this, huh?" "I already did." He let out a long breath. "Fine. But don't call me when you can't figure things out. Don't say I didn't warn you." And just like that he was gone. I sat there with the phone still warm in my hand, the hum of the dial tone filling the silence. I didn't cry. I didn't even tremble. Instead I walked to the counter, pulled the pie I'd baked last night from the fridge, and cut myself a slice. It wasn't about the pie. It was about taking what I wanted without apology. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the kitchen floor, someone knocked on my door again, lighter this time, hesitant. "Grandma." "Rachel." I opened the door immediately. She stood there in her work clothes, hair pulled back, face flushed from the drive. She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to sleep over every summer, sneaking extra cookies from my pantry. "Hi, honey," I said, stepping aside. "You came." "Of course I came." She held up a grocery bag. "I brought soup." "Don't worry, I made it myself, not Mom." I laughed. "Then it's probably edible." She grinned and walked in. The house seemed warmer instantly. We sat in the kitchen, eating soup and talking. She told me about her new job, her awful boss, her cat who liked to sleep on her laptop. I really listened, and for the first time in weeks I didn't feel like someone's burden. I felt like someone's grandmother. After a while, she set her spoon down and looked at me carefully. "Dad's kind of losing it." "I know. He said you're being manipulated. That someone's taking advantage of you." I smirked. "If anyone's manipulating me, it's me." Rachel laughed. "That's what I figured." She hesitated, then said quietly, "I'm proud of you, Grandma." I felt something shift in my chest, something I hadn't let myself feel since Arthur died. Not pride, not even peace, just seen. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly. When she left, she hugged me longer than usual. At the door, she turned back. "You know," she said, "Dad doesn't know what to do when he's not in charge." "I know," I said, "but maybe it's time he learns." That night I couldn't sleep. The house hummed quietly, the refrigerator kicking on and off, the wind brushing against the shutters. I got up, padded barefoot to the window, and looked out at the SUV parked under the carport. Arthur's voice came again, faint but there. "You've still got fire in you, Marth. Don't you ever let it go out." I smiled. "Don't worry," I whispered. "I won't." And for the first time in a long while, I went to bed with a plan, not just to protect what was mine, but to live the way I used to, on my own terms. Because this wasn't about a car anymore. It was about reclaiming the driver's seat of my own life. Jason didn't come around for almost a week. A record, really. Normally, he couldn't go 2 days without checking, hovering, just making sure I hadn't burned down the house or fallen off a chair. But this time, silence. I thought it would feel peaceful. Instead, it felt like waiting for a storm you could smell before it hit. And when it came, it wasn't thunder. It was paperwork. I found the envelope on my porch one morning, heavy cream-colored, embossed with the logo of some financial firm I didn't recognize. Inside, a polite letter. "Per your son's request, we have updated the account beneficiary structure and will require confirmation of your consent." Consent. That word again. Always floating around me like I was an experiment in someone else's lab. Only this time I didn't simmer. I smiled. I walked straight to the kitchen drawer, pulled out Harold's business card and called. "Harold Price speaking." "It's me," I said. "He's at it again." Within an hour, Harold had called the firm. By afternoon, the changes were frozen. I didn't even have to raise my voice. That night, I poured myself a glass of sherry and sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on. It felt good, the quiet satisfaction of not being helpless. I'd been treated like a fragile vase for too long. Admired, protected, but never trusted to hold anything. Not anymore. The next day I got a visit. No knock this time. Just the doorbell, sharp and insistent. When I opened it, there he was. Jason, standing in my doorway in his usual armor. Pressed shirt, tired eyes, phone in hand. "Mom," he said flatly. "Jason." He exhaled hard through his nose. "Can we talk?" "That depends," I said. "Are you here to listen or to lecture?" His jaw twitched. "I just want to understand what's going on. You're acting different." "Different?" I echoed. "Or alive?" He blinked, thrown off. "Mom, come on. I'm worried. You're making decisions without thinking them through. You revoked my bank access. You contacted a lawyer. I reinstated control of my accounts," I interrupted. "And Harold's been my lawyer for 30 years. He's practically family." Jason's voice rose. "You're letting people manipulate you. That's not Harold's job. He's supposed to protect you, not encourage." "Jason." I cut him off sharply. "Stop talking to me like I'm your client. I raised you. I changed your diapers. I paid your tuition when you wanted to find yourself in grad school. I am not losing my mind. I am reclaiming it." He froze. For once he had no quick reply. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "You've been treating me like a fragile thing you can manage. But I'm not a thing, Jason. And I don't need management. His face softened briefly. Mom, I just don't want to lose you. You lost me, I said quietly, the moment you stopped seeing me as a person. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking away. You don't mean that. I did. But I didn't say it again. He rubbed his temples. All right. You've made your point. Can we just have dinner sometime? I'll bring the kids. No lawyers, no tension. I nodded slowly. Maybe. When he left, he didn't hug me. He didn't even look back. But I noticed something different in his walk. Not anger this time, not arrogance. Caution. Good. Let him wonder what I'll do next. That evening, Rachel called again. Grandma, she said, you should have seen Dad. He came home looking like someone told him he's grounded. I laughed. He stopped by. What did he say? Nothing worth repeating. But he'll think twice before selling another thing that isn't his. Rachel chuckled. You're kind of a legend now, you know. My friends keep saying they wish their grandmas were like you. Tell them to be careful what they wish for, I said. Being like me takes a lot of patience and a little bit of fury. She laughed again, the kind of laugh that fills a house. When the call ended, the silence felt different, softer, not empty. 2 days later, I went back to the diner. The same crack sign, the same smell of burnt coffee and fried eggs. The old man behind the counter looked up and grinned. Back again, huh? Guess I missed the pie, I said. He poured me a coffee without asking. You from around here? Used to be. Still am in a way. He nodded like that made perfect sense. People always come back when they've got something to settle. I smiled. You might be right about that. After a few sips, I pulled out my notepad. The one I'd started the day Jason sold my car. The first page still said things that are mine. Below it, I added a new line. My piece. That one took the longest to underline. When I got home, there was another envelope in the mail, this one from Harold. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside was a single-page summary. All assets legally secured under your individual ownership. No further external access authorized. Confirmation of vehicle title dispute pending. I read it twice. Then again. It was done. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't waiting for someone to decide something for me. That night, I slept better than I had since Arthur's funeral. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor. I made coffee, watered my plants, even hummed a little as I dusted the shelves. When the doorbell rang around 10, I didn't flinch. It wasn't Jason. It was a courier, a tall man with a clipboard. Delivery for Mrs. Mercer, he said. Signature required. I signed and took the envelope. No return address. Inside was a check and a short note. For the Chevy. I didn't realize how much it meant to you. I'm sorry, Jason. I stared at it for a long time. The amount was fair. Maybe even generous. I folded the check neatly, slid it into the drawer and whispered, You're learning, son. That afternoon, I took the SUV for a drive. Not far. Just to the overlook by the river where Arthur and I used to sit on warm evenings. The air was crisp, the water silver under the light. I parked, turned off the engine, and let the quiet sink in. People talk about freedom like it's a grand, loud thing. But it isn't. It's small and still and solid. Like the sound of your own breath when no one's telling you what to do. I sat there for nearly an hour thinking about Arthur, about Rachel, even about Jason. About how control is just another word for fear. And how love, the real kind, has to make room for choice. When I finally drove home, I felt lighter. Not young but strong. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about remembering that I'd never really lost. That night I called Rachel. Sweetheart, I said. How do you feel about going for a little drive tomorrow? She laughed. You mean like together? Like a road trip? Just us girls. Grandma, she said, grinning through the phone. I'm in. I smiled, eyes on the SUV parked outside, gleaming under the porch light. Arthur once told me that the only real revenge in life is living well. I finally understood what he meant. Tomorrow we'd drive with the windows down. And I'd let the wind carry away whatever pieces of the past were still clinging on. Because the road ahead finally belonged to me. I didn't expect freedom to feel like this, quiet, weightless, and a little dangerous. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The sky was a pale, sleepy pink, and the house felt too still, like it was holding its breath. I brewed coffee, packed 2 sandwiches, and waited for Rachel's little car to pull into the driveway. She arrived at 7 sharp, hair a mess, smile wide. "Morning, Grandma," she said, stepping out and stretching like a cat. "You ready for our grand escape?" "Born ready," I said, locking the front door behind me. "And bring your appetite. We're getting pie on the way." We didn't plan much. That was the point. We just drove, no destination, no schedule, no one asking where or why. The road stretched ahead like a promise. For a while we talked about small things, the kids in her college class, the dog she wanted to adopt, how her parents never seemed to stop arguing lately. I listened, nodded, and remembered what it was like to be her age, so sure the world could be fixed with enough good intentions. At one point she looked over and said, "Dad's still kind of mad, you know?" I didn't answer right away. "About the car?" She shook her head. "About you not needing him." That stung more than I expected. "I raised a man who mistakes control for love," I said finally. "I suppose that's my fault, too." Rachel glanced at me, eyes soft. "No, Grandma. You raised a man who's scared of losing you. He just doesn't know how to show it." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time he learns." We stopped at a small roadside diner. Not the same one as before, but it had the same chipped mugs and smell of bacon that clung to everything. The waitress called everyone Han. Rachel ordered pancakes the size of hubcaps. I ordered coffee and toast. Halfway through breakfast she asked, "Do you ever miss him? Grandpa, I mean." I looked out the window. The sunlight caught the dust in the air, making it look like glitter. "Every day," I said. "But not the way you think. I don't miss the routine, the noise, or even the conversations. I miss the way he looked at me like I was still capable of surprises." Rachel smiled. "You still are, Grandma." I laughed. "You mean because I stole your father's car?" "That, and because you're the only person I know who still writes letters." "Letters tell the truth," I said. "Emails pretend to." She laughed, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't in years, light. As if the world wasn't closing in but opening up. After breakfast we drove again. The radio played old songs I hadn't heard since Arthur and I were young, Carole King, Fleetwood Mac, Simon and Garfunkel. Rachel sang softly under her breath. I joined in once or twice, off-key and shameless. By noon we reached the coast. Not the same one Arthur and I had driven to years ago, but close enough. The ocean spread out like an old friend. Gray, endless, familiar. We parked and walked along the sand, shoes in hand. The air was cool, sharp with salt. Seagulls screamed overhead. I felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with age or defiance, just presence. Rachel turned to me suddenly. "You know, I think you're the bravest person I know." I laughed. "Bravery's just what people call stubbornness when it finally works out." She smiled. "Still, I hope I'm like you when I'm older." I squeezed her hand. "You already are, sweetheart. You just haven't had to prove it yet." We stayed until the sky started to darken. Then we sat on a bench overlooking the water, eating the sandwiches I'd packed. The bread had gone soggy, but neither of us cared. "I don't think I want to go back just yet," Rachel said softly. "Then we won't," I said. She looked at me with that mix of admiration and disbelief only the young can manage. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I've spent too many years waiting for permission," I said. "From your father. From doctors. From time itself. No more." Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time. The waves whispering secrets only the brave could keep. When we finally got home, the porch light was on. Jason's car was in the driveway. Rachel groaned. "Oh." "Don't worry," I said, straightening my coat. "Let me handle this." He was sitting on the steps, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. When he saw us, he stood quickly. "Mom," he said, relief and frustration tangled in his voice. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." I smiled faintly. "Out. Living." "Living." He threw his hands up. "You disappeared. No calls, no notes, nothing. I had no idea where you were." "You had no idea," I said. "Because you didn't ask where I wanted to be. You just assumed I'd be where you needed me." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, please. I'm trying here. I made a mistake, okay? I shouldn't have sold your car. I just thought." That I couldn't handle life without your help? He looked away. That you'd be safer. I nodded slowly. You've said that word before. Safe. But safe isn't living, Jason. It's just another kind of cage. Rachel hovered near the door, silent. Jason rubbed his face, tired. I don't know how to fix this. You don't, I said. You learn from it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. Here, he said. It's not much. Just something for the Chevy. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can start by admitting I was wrong. I took it, but I didn't open it. Thank you, I said. He nodded once, eyes glossy, then turned to leave. At the bottom of the steps he stopped and looked back. I really do love you, Mom, even when I mess it up. I know, I said. Maybe now you can love me enough to let me live my own way. He gave a small nod, then drove off. That night, Rachel and I sat in the living room, tea steaming between us. She looked at me over her mug. So what now? I smiled. Now we plan another drive. Maybe somewhere new this time. Her eyes lit up. You mean like a real trip? I nodded. A real one. No apologies. No permissions. Grandma, she said. You're unstoppable. I laughed quietly. No, sweetheart. I'm just finally in motion. Later, after she went to bed, I stood at the window watching the SUV gleam under the porch light. I thought of Arthur, of all the years I'd spent believing that getting older meant fading away. But fading isn't inevitable. It's a choice. And I'd made mine. Tomorrow I'd send Harold a letter. Not about the bank, not about Jason, but about setting up something new. Trust, maybe. For Rachel. For the kind of freedom you can't buy or inherit. Because the real legacy I wanted to leave wasn't money or property. It was proof that even at 74, a woman can still take back her life. And I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Jason, not Rachel, not even Harold when he called to confirm the papers had been filed. I'll be gone a few days, I said, packing a small bag with clothes, my journal, and a photograph of Arthur from our wedding day. That's fine, Martha, Harold said. But be careful, all right? I smiled into the phone. Careful is exactly what got me here, Harold. The road was quiet that morning. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the open sky. I'd left a note for Rachel on the kitchen table. Don't worry. I'm exactly where I need to be. The world looked different when you weren't rushing through it. Every mile felt like a chapter one hadn't finished reading. Fields, gas stations, faded motels, towns with one main street and a diner that hadn't changed in decades. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind mess up my hair. I sang along to old songs I barely remembered the words to. It didn't matter. No one was listening but me. At some point I realized I was crying. Not from sadness, not really, but from something deeper. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. I'd spent years being still for everyone else. Now I was finally moving for myself. By noon I stopped at a lake I hadn't seen since I was in my 20s. Arthur and I used to come here in summer with a picnic basket and too much optimism. The water was the same deep blue. The air still smelled like pine and memory. I parked the SUV under a tree and sat by the shore. The grass was cool against my palms. Across the lake, kids were shouting, laughing, chasing a ball that would eventually roll into the water. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. This, I thought, is what freedom sounds like. When I opened my eyes again, I noticed something glinting in the shallows. A small, smooth stone. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. Just an ordinary rock, but for some reason I slipped it into my pocket. Maybe because it felt real. Solid. Mine. The next day I drove to the coast again, farther this time. The air grew saltier, the roads narrower. The world seemed to quiet down as if it understood I was coming to a decision. I found a motel near a lighthouse and checked in under my own name. No Mrs. this time. Just Martha Mercer. The man at the desk looked at me oddly, maybe because I didn't have luggage, maybe because women my age usually didn't travel alone. Vacation? He asked. Something like that, I said. The room smelled of dust and seaweed, but when I opened the window, the ocean rushed in like an old friend. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote in my journal. I used to think independence was something you earned. But it's not. It's something you take back, one decision, one drive, one quiet act at a time. That evening I walked down to the lighthouse. The sky was turning purple, the waves restless against the rocks. I stood at the railing and let the wind pull at my cardigan. Arthur used to say that every person has one true horizon, the place where their soul feels wide enough. Maybe this was mine. Maybe it always had been. I took out the stone from my pocket, turned it over once more, and tossed it into the sea. It sank without a sound. "Goodbye, Arthur," I whispered. "And thank you for everything, the love, the lessons, the patience I'd finally learned too late." The next morning I packed my bag again. I left the key on the dresser and wrote a short note for the motel clerk. "Tell the next woman who checks in that she deserves to drive her own road, no matter her age." Then I got back in the SUV and started the engine. I didn't know exactly where I was heading. Maybe I'd visit Rachel at school. Maybe I'd find a small cottage near the coast and rent it for the summer. Maybe I'd just keep driving until the road stopped giving me answers. For once, not knowing felt like peace. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. A text from Jason. "Jason, Mom, are you okay? Rachel said you went on a trip." Me, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry." Jason. "I just wanted to say, I get it now. I really do." Me, "Good. Then you'll know not to come looking." Jason, "Okay. But, send me a postcard?" I smiled. It was small, but it was something. I stopped at a little souvenir shop in a beach town and bought a postcard with a picture of a woman standing beside a red convertible, hair flying in the wind. On the back I wrote, "Jason, I'm safe, I'm happy, and I finally remember who I am. Love, Mom." I mailed it, dropped the keys into the ignition, and drove toward the horizon. The sun was low by the time I reached the next town. The light turned everything gold. The road, the rooftops, even my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in decades, I didn't see a tired woman. I saw someone alive. Someone still becoming. When I stopped for gas, a young attendant smiled and said, "Nice ride. Yours?" I met his eyes. Every inch of it. He grinned. "Good for you." I nodded, got back behind the wheel, and pulled onto the highway. The tires hummed against the asphalt, steady, sure. In the mirror, the past was shrinking. Just a blur of roads already traveled. Ahead, the world was wide open. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone to tell me where to go.